Welcome back to Facing the Mirror. Today, we're talking about something that bruises a lot of egos and forces people to confront a truth they may not be ready to hear. What if the breakup that you thought devastated your ex didn't? What if the silent treatment, the new relationship, the carefully curated social media posts, and the attempts to make them jealous had absolutely no effect? What if they weren't sitting at home crying, obsessing, and waiting for you to come back? What if they were simply relieved? That is a hard pill to swallow because many people do not grieve the loss of the relationship as much as they grieve the loss of control, validation, and significance. They want to believe they were unforgettable. They want to believe they left a permanent scar. They want to believe the other person is still emotionally bleeding because it helps them feel powerful. But sometimes the most painful realization is this. The person you thought you broke may have been emotionally detached long before the relationship ended. They may have already mourned the relationship while they were still in it. They may have spent months or even years feeling unseen, manipulated, criticized, or emotionally exhausted. By the time they left, they were not heartbroken, they were done. And that is where the ego begins to panic. Because if someone can walk away and genuinely be at peace, it forces you to ask a much deeper question. Did they ever need me the way I needed them to need me? That question can feel unbearable. Not because you love them deeply, but because your identity may have become tied to being important to them. There's a difference between loving someone and needing to feel irreplaceable. One is connection, the other is ego. And breakups have a way of exposing which one was actually running the relationship. Now let's take this a step further. Could a narcissist date another narcissist? Absolutely. In fact, it happens more often than people realize. Despite what social media likes to suggest, narcissistic traits are not always obvious. They do not always show up as arrogance or grandiosity. Sometimes they appear as chronic victimhood. Sometimes they look like emotional manipulation. Sometimes they show up as an inability to apologize, take accountability, or tolerate criticism. Sometimes they appear as a relentless need to be chosen, admired, or rescued. When two people with strong narcissistic traits come together, the relationship can feel electric at first. Both are trying to secure admiration. Both are trying to avoid shame. Both are deeply sensitive to rejection. Both want to be seen as the one who was wronged. And both may struggle to look honestly in the mirror. So the relationship becomes less about intimacy and more about negotiation. Who gets to be right? Who gets to be the victim? Who gets to control the narrative? Who gets to leave first? Who gets to appear unaffected? It becomes a psychological chess match where each person is trying to protect a fragile sense of self. And underneath all of it is fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of insignificance, fear of being exposed, fear of not being enough. This is why some breakups become performances. A new relationship is announced immediately. Cryptic posts appear online. Mutual friends are recruited as witnesses. Stories are rewritten. Blame is assigned. And all of it is designed to answer one desperate question. Do I still matter? But healing begins when you stop asking whether you hurt them. Healing begins when you stop needing them to suffer in order to validate your worth. Healing begins when you accept that someone moving on does not erase your significance. And it certainly does not define your value. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do is admit that the relationship was not love. It was two wounded people trying to extract from one another what they had not yet learned to give themselves. Validation, security, importance, identity. That is not a moral failure. It is an invitation to grow, because the goal of healing is not to become the one who wins the breakup. The goal is to become someone who no longer needs to win, someone who can tolerate being misunderstood, someone who can release the fantasy of revenge, someone who can stop checking to see whether the other person still cares, and someone who can finally turn inward and ask, why did I need another person's pain to prove that I mattered? That is where the real work begins. Not in proving you were unforgettable, not in making someone regret losing you, not in convincing the world that you were the better partner, but in sitting with the uncomfortable possibility that your greatest heartbreak was not losing them. It was losing the version of yourself that believed your worth depended on being wanted. And once you understand that, the breakup becomes something very different. It becomes a mirror reflecting every insecurity, every unmet need, every fear of abandonment, and every part of you that still believes your value must be earned. And if you are willing to look honestly, that mirror can become the doorway to profound healing, because your worth was never determined by how badly someone missed you. Your worth was never measured by whether they replaced you. Your worth was never dependent on being the one they could not forget. Your worth has always existed independently of who stayed and who left. The real question is not whether they cared. The real question is why their caring became the evidence you used to measure your own value. That is the reflection I want to leave you with today. Sometimes the breakup that hurts the most is the one that reveals you were seeking validation, not connection. And sometimes the greatest freedom comes when you no longer need to be remembered in order to know that you mattered. This is Christina Stuller, and this is Facing the Mirror, where healing begins the moment you stop chasing answers from other people and start finding them within yourself.